Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host and moderator. Our topic today, this is going to be a fun one. Our title officially is Hiring the Right Number Two, Matching Your COO to Your Growth Stage. Fascinating topic. And just talking about COO and the role of CEO is fascinating enough, but really understanding growth stages, I think a really interesting nuance to this. I've got two great guests here I'm going to introduce in a second. And for our audience, I just wanted to say a couple things. If you are on LinkedIn and you have a question for us today, go ahead and put it into the comments on the LinkedIn page. We'll watch those. We'll try to weave them into the conversation. If you're on YouTube, we're streaming out on YouTube as well. I won't be watching the YouTube comments. So if you do have a comment, jump over to LinkedIn and put it there so we can capture it. If you are on the replay on either LinkedIn or YouTube, go ahead and put comments, questions onto those pages. We'll watch those in the coming days and weeks. So even if you're not here with us live, go ahead and put those in there and we'll engage there. Let me introduce our guests. First up, I've got Ben Wolf. He is the founder and CEO of Wolf's Edge Integrators, the largest fractional number two leader firm in the world. He's also the author of the best-selling book, The Fractional Leadership, Landing Executive Talent You Thought Was Out of Reach. So we're going to hear about the work he's done there. And he helps visionary founders scale by matching them with experienced fractional COOs who know how to lead at different stages of business. With all that, Ben, welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Very good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And next up, I've got Chris Barnes. He is a leadership advisor and organization development expert. He has a deep understanding in building high-performance executive teams. And after shepherding an accounting firm that went from 10 to 15 million in 3 years as their COO, he is now a fractional COO at Wolf's Edge. So we're going to hear about the actual on-the-ground fractional COOs do. And he works with COOs and senior leaders to design structures and match second-in-command talents so that they can align with their strategic outcomes. With all that, Chris, welcome to the program.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So let's get into it. Why don't we start actually with just kind of defining COO, because I think a lot of people kind of throw out second in command, COO, like second-hand person or right-hand person kind of things. Mm-hmm. As a left-handed person, I take offense to the right-handed thing, but well, that's different conversation. But what do we actually mean by COO, second in command? And Ben, why don't we start with you on this one? Like, what's your kind of rough definition of this?
Yeah, I would say the way we define like the essence, if you would boil it down to its essence, is that the COO or number two leader is the person who runs the business so that the owner could stay in their number one mode, which is what we call it, which is their superpower, the thing or things that they love doing and are great at, and that move the needle the most for the business. Yeah. And when somebody's got the right number two, that's right for their stage of business evolution, then that person can really run the business, lead and elevate the leadership team, own the P&L, drive execution of the day-to-day and of the things that make tomorrow bigger and better than they are today. Yeah. So that the owner, the visionary, whatever they want to call it, can be free for that superpower mode, what we call that number one mode. Like really at its essence, the right number two is doing that.
Yeah. Chris, how do you what's your nuance on this whole role of COO and their job and responsibilities?
So there's no difference in the role itself. I think being still heavily part of being the operator, I get into the how pretty quickly, right? What is it that they do with all of this within the role? And it's that we simplify complexity. And we do that based on the type that we're going to discuss, right? The different types married to the right stage, because each stage or section of stages has different complexity that's just inherent to the stage. And so you have to have that right number two leader that matches with the complexity that's at that stage, that can come in and go, okay, I've got you. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. This is how we simplify that for you now to go to the next stage you're trying to get to.
Yeah. I'm curious, at what point, I mean, if you're a founder, just kind of founder stepping into the CEO role, right? It's a whole kind of different conversation of when do you go from founder to CEO? But as a founder, like when do you start to think about, or when should you start to think about bringing in some type of second in command, number two, COO? Like what's what are the telltales or the situational kind of triggers or indicators that a founder should be looking for that this is something they should be start thinking about? Either one of you can jump in on that one.
Well, I think Ben's lived it, so I want to hear your answer first as the founder, and then I'm going to give you my input.
Sounds good, Ben.
One is, I would say it's almost never too early. I would say that founders that are, even as little as 1 or 2 million, and certainly if you're 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 50 million or more, can and should be considering it. And, but even at that size, some people with 8, 10, 15 person teams, can look at that. Sometimes the right number 2 leader, maybe somebody that you can hire full time. Maybe they're also sitting in another seat, like head of operations, which is a separate seat from the number 2, or head of product or whatever it might be in the business, and be your number 2 leader. You can, if you have the right person, they might be able to do that. Or sometimes to find the right caliber and the right experience of person, you might need to look at a fractional resource. Because then you can get the type of caliber that you may not be able to afford or may not even need on a full-time basis.
Yeah. Chris, what's yours?
I'll tackle the very first thing that you said in that question was, when should they? Because it's usually, or when do they? And it's usually later than they should have. Right? Because what tends to happen is you start a business, you're doing all of the things, and you reach the point where you're the chief everything officer. But it's still getting you results. And so until that becomes unacceptable versus just uncomfortable, you're not going to make the move necessary to bring somebody in to take that weight off of you and help add the structure that your business needs at that stage. So, and that's usually when we come in. Oftentimes, if we go into a company where you have something that's stable, it's growing, there's just not enough pain there for the person that's about to make this decision. It makes it I won't say for a bad client, right? But it's a more challenging client because they can see, look, I'm having success. Why do I need to let go of this and give it to you? And so, you asked earlier, what does the COO do? And I laugh because we're like a therapist half the time, and there's just a lot of that interpersonal stuff that has to go into this to deal with the psychology of this person that has done well. Right. And the house doesn't feel like it's on fire. When should they do it? As soon as you can afford it. It just makes things work so much better for you and your business, and you can avoid the pitfalls that everyone goes through. And it's why so many businesses fail so early on in their lifetime.
I'll say my personal experience was, I think that one of the tricks or one of the mindset shifts is there were a lot of things I was doing that I was actually really good at, right, from an operations point of view. In fact, I was probably better at than my operations person in many respects, but by having my operations person take over a lot of those things, it freed me up to do things that I was so much better at, and created so much value for the organization that it was hard, because if I just looked at the task, I would say it's actually like I can do it faster and better and more strategic and things like that. So it wasn't that this person was going to do it better than me necessarily. It's that freed up the time that allowed me to do things that I was so unique in being able to do, that generated value. And I think that's what I see when I coach CEOs. That's a lot of the kind of mindset shift that they have to make, because it's not about, and it can be, and hopefully we can find people that are actually better at it. But even if they're not better at it, you should still do it, because it frees up your time to do those other valuable things. And that's a tough unlock for people to kind of get at some point. But I think that's the key thing around this whole growth. And we'll talk obviously about the kind of company growth journey and what the stages are and stuff. But I think that's a fundamental for me in terms of CEOs and founders looking at them.
That's such a great point. And first of all, I gotta call out Kristen Arnold, because she left a comment there. I think she's a fractional COO, which I recognize her name. So happy you're listening or watching. But just to go on, Bruce, that actually gets back to why I said what I said at the beginning when you asked what's the essence of a number 2 leader, which is that they're the person who runs the business so that you could stay in number 1 mode. Because the biggest multiplier in your business, like you said, maybe if you look at the task, okay, maybe it's not that different and you can save some money. But if you're if your number one mode, Bruce, is, let's say, sales, I mean, you could be, by you spending, 25, 30 hours a week in operations, and if you could redirect that time to be focused on sales, if that's your superpower, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Then you could be making millions more after a couple of years if week after week you were spending time on that.
Yeah.
And so you're leaving millions of dollars on the table in order to save pennies.
Yeah.
On the data, on the more day-to-day operations piece. And so that's really the biggest unlock of the right number two. Is unlocking you, channeling you as the business owner.
Yeah. I found it took a while too, because it was, as much as I kind of knew like some of the things I could be doing, it's like, like if I had another 20 hours a week, I could focus more on sales. I mean, maybe work on some partnerships. I'd, maybe sit, do some more work with some of our key accounts, like understanding where the kind of new possibilities are. But it wasn't until I actually got the number two in place and actually freed up that time that then I could use that time to actually dig into that in more detail. And I think that's, it's hard because I think a lot of founders end up, they don't know exactly what they're going to do at the time. And so they wait until they're like 100% sure. Oh, I know. And I'm kind of like, no, like do it now, free up the time, and then use that time to actually figure that out because it's there. I mean, as a strategic coach, like my job is to get that clear. Like there's growth opportunities, there's capabilities we need to build. Like if we've got a good plan, it's very clear what they should be doing. But even if you don't have a plan, sometimes I'm like, do it, free up that time, and then you'll start to figure those things out. I just talk a little bit about the rest of the leadership team, because I'm kind of curious what your experiences have been in terms of what the order of event is. Do I get my COO in place and then start thinking through some of the other functional kind of leads that I need to bring in? Do I get my functional leads in place? And then how does the CEO's relationship with the functional heads kind of relate to the COO? Like how do you kind of see the leadership team structure reorganize once you've got a good second in command? I'm kind of curious if you have best practices or things you've seen there. Chris, why don't we hear from you and for this first on this one, just because I'm curious how this is an operator.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the system of the business. A lot of our clients run EOS. We know there are so many different ones that are out there, right? And so the lens that we are taking into this is when we say the word second in command, we mean exactly that. Nobody else reports to the CEO but the second in command, so to speak. So your functional team, they all report to that second in command. Period, end of story. The only potential caveat to that is if your number one mode is sales, for example, and maybe you do sit in a sales seat. If you've got a head of sales, you report to that head of sales. Ben does that. Or if you are the head of sales, then you do have people within the sales team that report to you, right? And so it's managing those hats, so to speak, when it is. But by and large, nobody else should be coming to you but that second in command for anything related to the business.
Yeah. Ben, what's your experience here?
I'll say to answer your first question about order of operations, that's really what you asked also, which was the number two leader or the other operational leaders, whether it's marketing, sales, finance, operations, or whatever else there might be. It's a great question. It's very hard to give an across the board answer. What I would say is that all things being equal, you need to look at, what's going to be the biggest bang for your buck. There's going to be, if I'm going to bring in a head of operations to take over day-to-day client service or customer service, or I'm going to bring in somebody to take over sales, whatever it might be, or marketing or finance or HR, whatever it might be, you need to first, ask where's going to be the biggest bang for your buck, where it's going to free up the most of my time, what's going to make things the best for the business the fastest. And sometimes that's going to be the number two leader. Sometimes that's going to be the operations head. Sometimes that's going to be marketing or sales or R&D or whatever it might be. And the caveat, that's the general principle, I would say. So it's going to depend on circumstances. But the caveat I would say is that it's the most important principle is know thyself. And so if you as a business owner suck at finding the right people or setting them up for success in their role, then and you probably have had some failed hires before, maybe some failed departmental hires before, and you just know that that's not your sweet spot. You've got other strengths and we want to leverage you for those. So maybe bring in the number 2 leader, even if that's not your greatest area of pain, like maybe an exception to that general principle. Say, like, let them figure out what's the right path for this business, what are the right processes, what's the right order of operations for hiring.
Yeah.
We set up an onboarding process. How do we define success for this role so that someone knows how to be successful and what it means to be successful? And then hire someone, and then help lead the hiring of that role. And that's an exception, I would say, is that sometimes, even if maybe, let's say, operations is your biggest thing, but you're not going to make the right hire probably, and you're just going to be starting over another year or two from now, maybe do the number 2 first and let them lead that process.
Yeah. No, makes sense. So I want to get into the kind of the stages question here. Ben, why don't you kind of frame it up for us? Like when you think about finding kind of the right COO, what are the stages, or what are you looking at in terms of where the company is in terms of its growth, in terms of its development, and what are the factors that are really driving that, and how does that kind of affect? Well, let's get the stages figured out, and then we can talk about each stage. So what are the stages that you've identified as in the company?
So I would, I want to tee it up, and then I want to actually pass it on to Chris, because he has a great explanation for the sort of like an essential through line that really, is sort of like an essential axis that we could look at all 4 business evolution stages at. But, what I would tee it up as, though, is, and I think people are going to intuitively understand this, is that the right number 2 leader for a business, it's not the same for every business.
Yeah.
The type of person you need to initially systemize the business and set up your initial leadership team of a $2 million business is not the same person as the number 2 leader for a $50 million business, that wants to get to 100 million over the next 3 years. It's just not the same person.
Yeah.
Not the same type of number 2 leader. And so we've articulated and identified 3 different types of number 2 leader. So I would just say it's not a one size fits all thing, but I'll let Chris tee up the 4 stages and kind of like what's the unique factor about each stage.
Floor is yours, Chris.
Yeah. So the first stage that we talk about is survival, okay? And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's chaos. You don't have repeatable systems. You're right, hair on fire, constant emergencies, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. And
Reactive.
so that's the first stage. Yep. The second stage we talk about is the owner dependent stage. Again, you're the chief everything officer. You take vacation, sales don't get done. Right. You don't tell everyone what to do, things don't get done. The next stage that we talk about is incremental growth. And so you've matured a little bit in your progression. And now, maybe you've got a leadership team in place, sales are coming in, things are working, but you're going at a very small percentage per year is the way we look at it.
Okay.
And then we wrap it up with scale, right? Depends on what that means to you. For some people, that means, hey, we're going on an aggressive M&A strategy to grow. Others say, no, we're going to 10x the business in 3 years. All right. Doesn't matter what you put there, because now you have just multiplied complexity exponentially. And so the way that we look at it is throughout the 4 stages, there are different types. And an analogy that we like to use for people who can just think of it general business wise is you've got a startup. You say you want to scale your business overnight. So you got the funding in from the VC, and you go and you give away some equity and pay some high-powered person that's been in this large organization before. You bring them in, it fails drastically.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've taken somebody from one stage of business, brought them into the stage of business that they probably haven't done in years.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just not ready for their skill set. And so it's not a bad hire, it's just a misdiagnosed hire, right? And so what we've been able to discover is there are 3 types of number 2 leader. And so if you think of the earlier stages, we call that the operational number 2 leader.
Okay.
All right. And so again, early stage, the complexity is about the chaos. And so this person's going to come in and they're going to help you go from no processes, most likely, or processes in someone's head, right, to repeatable processes. to an operating rhythm that starts to push execution along in a way that you can start to rely on. That's going to get you through those earlier stages to where now you've built the foundation to go into this next part of the life cycle, right? And that's what we call the conductor.
Okay.
And so at this stage, we're talking about simplifying friction, and it's relational friction at this point. So think about it like you've built your leadership team, or you're building your leadership team. You've got some people in place, but say you have 4 of them and they're all standing around a rock on opposite sides of each other, pushing the rock and wondering why it's not going anywhere. Well, you need this person to come along and say, hey guys, girls, let's all get on one side of the rock.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to push the rock in the direction it should go.
Yeah.
We're not going to have silos, right? We're going to make sure that what we've built foundationally is now something we can use to make money for the business and serve our clients.
Yeah.
And then the last type that we have is called the executive. And so interestingly enough for them, the complexity that they're dealing with here is complexity at scale.
Yeah.
So all those earlier stages, we are building in complexity because it's necessary, but at some point that complexity holds the business back. And so for the executives that work with us that have been there and done that before, they come in and they go, okay, now we need to create the new system. We're going to keep the things that are necessary. We're not going to tear down what you've built, but we're going to create the new structure, a new engine for us to be able to go out and 10x this business in the next few years. That's your goal.
Yeah.
Right. Because every piece of complexity you add to the system, once you're talking about scale, it's exponential, not linear. It's not 1-to-1 like you can get at the earlier stages, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we do is we're able to have a conversation with you, the visionary. We have an assessment that we have you take. And through that, we are able to determine where you and the business are today, where you're trying to go with it tomorrow, and what's the gap we need to address right now. And that goes back to your order of operations question. Right? Because oftentimes someone will come in and they'll be like, okay, I'm ready to 10x my business. I'm like, yeah, okay. So we need to give you the operational first, because if you try to 10x this, it's like you starting off in a drag race and there's no bolts on your tires. Right? So that's our process, and it's what helps us better align this fractional from our side. But then we're able to move into, okay, now we're designing the seat, we're designing the role so that when we graduate you to full-time in-house, because the velocity of change is now such that you need someone there full-time, it's there, it's ready for them, and they can come in and they can be your full-time second in command, and not your second in command and whatever other job title you can give them. And it makes you wonder, why is this not happening?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of my best performing articles on Inc. actually is this article. It's the faster you want to grow, the more you need to focus. And the fundamental argument is that, like, if you really want to scale quickly, you've got to simplify. Like, you got to get it down to a very clear ICP. You've got to have a very clear product or service. You have to have a very specific way of selling it. And it has to be systematized, and it has to be repeatable, and it has to be something you can optimize. Because if you can't process and prove it, like, you're just going to create chaos. I mean, every little bit of chaos in a system is going to become a huge amount of chaos when you try to scale it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a founder, how do I self-assess some of these things? Like, how do I know what stage of that growth cycle I'm in? Are there telltales? Like, what are some of the things you look for? What are some of the things a founder could look for in kind of understanding where they might be in that continuum? I don't know, Ben, if you have any thoughts on that.
It's, well, the simplest answer is I would tell people we have actually a MOA assessment. We call it MOA, MOAA. Go to the, wolfsedgeintegrators.com, go to the assessments tab. You can see there's one for business owners there where you could take this. It takes about 5 minutes. And based on carefully calibrated questions, it's going to tell the person who's taking it, the business owner, which of those stages of business evolution they're at. Of those 4, which one they want to get to, how fast, and based on which one they want to get to and how fast, it's going to tell them which of those 3 types of number 2 leader they have right now, even if that's the owner themselves sitting in that seat in there for themselves, or if it's somebody else, and telling them which of those 3 types they need if they're serious about wanting to get where they say they want to go. And I say if they're serious because it goes back to Chris's point earlier. has the status quo become unacceptable, or is it just uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Are they in enough pain? And if they are in enough pain, whatever that means for them, because that's different from everybody, then tells them which type of number two leader they need if they're serious about wanting to get there.
Yeah.
But the indicators are like Chris said, if you need an operational, usually what you say, you're experiencing chaos. There's chaos, there's disorder, there's lack of systemization.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're seeing. And so if you're seeing chaos, likely, lack of documented processes, lack of one way to do everything that's not in one or more people's heads. Maybe different people are doing things each their own way. And things are breaking, fires are breaking out every day that always need to be put out. There seems to be entire roles dedicated. Maybe your role as the owner is the chief firefighter. And it's a not fun place to be. So that chaos may indicate operational is the right type, whether you're a $2 million company or a $20 million company. That is one. And then when it's time for a conductor, I would say that, when you want to get out of owner dependent mode, and you want to ensure that there's a conductor of the orchestra, ensuring that all the different functions of the business are, you're simplifying complexity, as Chris said, and all the different functions of the business are working seamlessly together. Marketing flows seamlessly into sales, which flows seamlessly into operations, which flows seamlessly into finance. And that takes a lot of effort to set that up, get everybody, how should this thing work together? And, and conduct that orchestra, make sure everybody's playing off the same piece of sheet music at the same tempo as each other, and pushing the rock in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then executive is when you get it, when you get at scale, either you already have a very large organization or you want to have very quickly a much larger organization. So that means you're going to have, or already have, complexity.
Yeah.
So you need somebody, which we call the executive type integrator, that has been there before, that has scaled and ran businesses of a large scale before, knows what that looks like, knows what that future state that you haven't seen yet needs to look like, so that they can take you there much faster and skip a lot of the guinea pigging on yourself.
Yeah. A good question for Chris on this one. I'm kind of curious, given these different stages, requiring kind of different types of COOs, does that mean as a founder, I'm going to have to hire 3 different COOs over my life, or can you find people that can bridge these gaps, or how does the evolutionary process work for that role? And how do I, as COO, kind of navigate who I'm putting into that role over time?
So I think the answer to every leadership question at some point is it depends.
Yeah, exactly.
I think usually the saying is true, right? What got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
Your speed and timing is the factor that matters most when you're talking about, okay, I brought this person on board when I was in the earlier stages. They have the capacity and ability to continue to grow with the business. There are some people that say, hey, nope, you reach this point, you absolutely have to have somebody else.
Yeah.
We look at it as, number one, we have all 3 types, which is great because we have an ecosystem. And so you could go from one person to the next, but chances are you could have the same person for at least 2 of those, 2 of those cycles, right? But by and large, in most instances, speed is the thing that's desired. And so when that's the case, it's going to be like the Bucks going out and getting Tom Brady. They weren't going to wait to develop a quarterback 3 years later, right? They went and got him, won a Super Bowl the very next year. And so that's when you're going to really zero in and dial in on, okay, this is where I am. This is where I'm trying to go. This is when I'm trying to get there. I need this person right now.
Yeah.
And so we help with that.
Just kind of a last question here for both of you. What's one sort of question that you would suggest founders ask themselves around this topic in terms of things that they should reflect on to kind of think a little bit about where they are on this journey, or where they are in terms of, having a solid second in command, what they could do if they had a better second in command in place? What's a little piece of advice or question you suggest people ask? Ben, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah. I would recommend they do what we call the 20-hour shift exercise, right? This is really a way, and I'm sure, Bruce, you do this all the time with your clients, like you said, as a strategic coach, but ask yourself, if you magically, without any guilt or worry, had an extra 20 hours a week freed up, what's your superpower or powers that you love doing or great at and move the needle the most in the business?
Yeah.
Then identify those 1, 2, or 3 things, and then say, okay, let's paint a picture. If I spent 20 more hours a week doing that every week for the next 2 years, quantify, write down, what would it look like in the business? What would our sales be? What would our culture be? What would our attrition be? What would our avoidance of market disasters be? Because I have time to think about looking around the corner. Quantify what that would mean for the business in dollars or in other ways. And then ask yourself, is it worth it? I mean, how can I afford not to bring in the right number 2 leader and leave these millions of dollars on the table, or however you quantified the answer to the number, the 20-hour shift exercise, which identifies your number 1 mode.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and then, find out how to find the right number 2.
Yeah. No, I do that. The other one I add to that question is, how much happier would you be?
Right.
And that's usually the one that puts up, because we can do the kind of the math, and I can probably generate another maybe $500,000 in revenue, in the next 6 months. Like, okay, well, we're talking about $1 million a year, right? Like, that's easy. But when I ask and how much happier would you be in that role? And they're like, oh yeah, all right, I'm going to hire it. That's what pushes them over. Chris, what's the question you give founders?
So it's not so much a question, because what Ben said is that's our first step. Right. But I would just leave everyone with this. Over the last year and a half, we have assessed 328 businesses. And what we have found is 76% of the time, the wrong number 2 leader is in that seat.
Yeah.
So you've got to be honest with yourself, because oftentimes it is the founder sitting in both seats.
Yeah.
Right. But if not, they've hired somebody or they've elevated somebody. And if 76% of the time it's wrong, then you need to seek somebody that can help you.
Yeah. Excellent. We're at time here. Thank you, gentlemen. I want to make sure people get contact information. Ben, if people want to find out more about you, more about Wolf's Edge, what's the best way to get that info?
Go to the wolfsedgeconsulting.com, take that MOA assessment to tell you what type of number 2 leader you have and what type of number 2 leader you need based on the answers there. That's number 1. You could also contact us through the site, or certainly DM either me or Chris on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, perfect. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Exact same. Yep. LinkedIn is fast. Getting us from the website, it's fast too. So
perfect. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com is email, eckfeldt.com is URL. Chris and Ben, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And so for all of our listeners, again, if you're watching the replay today, go ahead and leave comments and questions there. We will watch those over the coming days and weeks. And on LinkedIn here, obviously, we're all our profiles are linked to this event. So go ahead and check us out there. Feel free to reach out with any questions. And thank you everyone for joining. And we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live. Thanks, gentlemen. Take care.